I've lived on our small homestead in Canton, Missouri for about 8 years now. My husband and I moved here to raise goats, chickens, and our 3 kids in peace and quiet. It's not a huge farm, but it's enough to keep us busy. My mornings are predictable. Goats bleating until they're fed, chickens squabbling over corn, kids bargaining for popsicles if they help lock the hens in at night. The barn sits about 60 yards from the house, and behind it, pasture slopes toward the tree line. We don't go back there often in the evenings. Mosquitoes get bad and the grass grows thick. That space was always background noise to me, nothing more. That changed last June when my youngest daughter, 6 at the time, said something I couldn't shake. There's a man in the hole. She was sitting at the kitchen table, swinging her legs and licking grape popsicle juice off her wrist when she announced it casually. "Mom, the man in the hole behind the barn waved at me today." I laughed it off at first. She'd been on a sandbox castle kick lately, digging little ditches in the yard and calling them forts. I figured this was the same sort of thing. But that night, when I went to shut the barn door, I noticed something odd. On the inside of the stall door were little dusty handprints about the size of hers. The thing was, none of my kids had been out there that day. I brushed it aside. Kids get into everything. But the phrase, "man in the hole," kept circling my head. We have an old hound, Duke, who mostly sleeps on the porch and only really barks if a coyote wanders too close. But 3 nights in a row, he startled me awake barking in the same direction, toward the back pasture. I'd check from the window and see nothing. No movement in the grass, no glowing eye shine, just Duke pulling at the end of his chain, fur bristled. On the 4th morning, I finally decided to walk out there in daylight. Tucked against the slope where the barn meets the rise of the pasture, I found it. A hand-dug pit, about 6 feet long, 3 feet deep, covered loosely with brush. Inside were old blankets, open cans of beans, a small pile of AA batteries, and worst of all, a cheap tripod with a camera mounted on it, aimed straight toward the back of my house. The little red recording light wasn't blinking. The SD card slot was empty. I stood there for a long time, not even breathing. This wasn't a child's fort. Someone had been living back there, watching us. I called the county sheriff immediately. 2 deputies came out, poked around, and collected the blankets and cans. They asked me if anyone had been trespassing or if I'd noticed strangers around. I told them about my daughter's comment and Duke's barking. They nodded, said they'd keep an eye out, and left. Just like that. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with the lights off, staring out at the dark silhouette of the barn. Around 11:30, headlights swept across the front windows. A car slowed in our driveway, paused, then kept going down the road. My insides went cold. I called my brother, who lives a mile away. He came over, and together we sat in the dark with our phones recording. At 1:40, right on Duke's usual schedule, he went wild again. This time, I caught movement. A figure slipped along the side of the barn, pausing near the pit. Duke lunged and barked until his chain rattled. The figure didn't run at first. It moved carefully, crouched low, like it was trying to grab something from the pit. I shouted before I could think, "Get out of here!" That broke it. The figure bolted toward the tree line, vanishing into the dark. When dawn came, my brother and I checked. The tarp had been freshly relayed over the pit. New shoe prints, men's size 10, maybe 11, circled the area. And hidden under a piece of brush a few yards away, we found another camera on a mini tripod. This one was pointed directly at the kids' playset. That broke me. The deputies came back, collected the second camera, and told us that a few neighbors had reported missing food from their garages. They figured it was a drifter or someone camping in the woods. I wanted more than guesses. For a week, my kids slept in my room. My husband welded locks onto the barn doors, installed floodlights, and real cameras. 2 months later, deputies recovered a stolen truck 3 counties over. Inside was a duffel bag with batteries, canned food, and a list of addresses scrawled on a notepad. The sheriff wouldn't confirm if our address was on it, but from the look he gave me, I think it was. I still can't get the image out of my head. That second camera trained on the playset. How long had he been watching? How close had he gotten? My youngest doesn't talk about the man in the hole anymore. She won't even go near the back pasture. And me, I can't stand the sound of Duke barking at night now. Every time he does, I wonder if someone's back there, crouched low, waiting for another chance. I'm a farmer outside Fairfield, Iowa. 42 at the time, October 2019, middle of harvest. My life then was all about dryer fans, grain bins, shop heater that never wanted to start, walking gates before bed. We've got 3 silos, but only 2 in use. The old one, north side I'd mothballed in 2014, kept it around for spare parts. That month, I was drinking water at the kitchen sink one night. That window faces the yard, when I noticed something odd. Inside the unused silo just above the base was a faint glow. It looked like the kind of light you get from a phone cupped in someone's hand. I grabbed the big spotlight and went out. Nothing. Checked the door. Padlock was there, hanging loose. I tried to dismiss it as a one-time thing. Until the next night. Same window, same time, same light. That second time, I checked the ladder. Dust covered most of it, but the lower rungs had finger smudges, like someone had steadied themselves climbing. I stepped inside. My flashlight beam picked up one set of prints in the dust, leading in and out. Nothing else. I shut the door like that and made it final, but something didn't sit right. The third night, I put a motion camera on the bin auger housing, pointed at the silo door. Cheap trail cam, but it would do. At 2:17 a.m., the screen chirped, logged movement, then spit out a corrupted file. I didn't like that one bit. Next night, same glow from the kitchen. I went out slower. Inside, the dust was scuffed into arcs, like someone pacing. The camera caught it this time. Not movie clear, but clear enough. A figure inside walking the circle of the wall, hands in pockets, denim straps over the shoulders. The overalls looked just like mine. One of my good pairs had gone missing in August. Now here they were, on someone walking inside my old silo. That was enough. The following night, I set up in my pickup across the yard, windows cracked, flashlight and rifle ready. At 2:12, the glow appeared again. I eased the silo door open and slipped my light inside. Dust footprints circled the floor. On the grain sweep lay my overalls, folded. I touched them. Warm. For one long second, I swear I heard another breath in the cylinder, not mine. Then, footsteps outside. I spun with the beam. Nothing but corn stalks shivering in the wind. When I turned back, the glow was gone. Just me, dust, and those overalls. I called the sheriff. We reviewed the footage together on my kitchen table. The figure was plain as day. Trespasser, he said. Could be a drifter. He tried to keep it light, but his pen tapping told me he didn't like it either. When we searched the silo together, we found my pocket tape in the bib pocket. A strip had been torn from it, 8 to 9 inches. Measured what? The door? Space inside? I welded a steel plate across the silo door and mounted a motion flood. Still, 2 nights later, the flood kicked on at 2:16 a.m. The cam log cut out minutes before, just like the first time. All I got was a bright white shot of myself, barefoot with a rifle, staring into nothing. Too close. I didn't wait around. I called a crew and had the silo torn down within weeks. Replaced it with a shipping container, locks that don't care about fingers or habits. It cost me, but I'll tell you what, it felt cheaper than leaving that thing standing. Still, something stayed. My body learned a new alarm clock. 2 a.m. Even after the silo was gone, I'd wake and listen. Sometimes I'd swear I heard the fence wire ping like it does when something brushes it. I'd go out, nothing but frost and deer prints. The deputy called it trespass. I call it something else. Whoever it was, they walked circles in my dust, wore my clothes, measured something I don't want to know. Maybe they were rehearsing. For what? I don't guess. But I know this. I've seen wrecks and storms take more than I'd like, and none of it made me feel like standing in that dark cylinder did. Running a wheat farm as a single mom isn't exactly the life I thought I'd end up with, but it's mine. My dad passed a few years back, and I couldn't stomach the idea of letting his land go. So it's me, my son Jacob, and acres of wheat that stretch so far they look like they could swallow the horizon. The days are long and the nights are quiet, except for sprinklers, crickets, and wind dragging through the stalks. It was during one of those nights that Jacob whispered something that changed how I'd ever look at those fields again. It was hot, one of those sticky Oklahoma evenings where even the wind feels tired. I'd just come in from shutting the barn and flipping off the sprinklers. Jacob was at the kitchen table, pencil in hand, hair sticking to his forehead. I gave him a popsicle for finishing his math problems without whining. Simple rhythms. Those are what keep life manageable. The wheat outside was shoulder high, gold and endless. Our house sat alone at the edge of it. That view used to comfort me. Now it feels like too much space for things to hide. Jacob looked up from his paper and said, so soft I almost missed it, "Mom, the men are back." I frowned. "What men?" He pointed out the window toward the field. I squinted, but all I saw was stalks shifting with the breeze. "Honey, there's no one out there, just the wind." He didn't argue, just hunched over his notebook again. I brushed it off as kid imagination, but his tone, that whisper, stuck with me. The next evening, I was standing at the sink, rinsing dishes, when something snagged my eye. 30 yards out, in the sea of wheat, two shapes stood taller than the rest. For a second, I thought they were fence posts I'd never noticed, but they weren't there the night before. I blinked, leaned closer, and they were gone. I tried to laugh it off. Wheat can play tricks when the sun dips low, the shadows stretching long. But I didn't tell Jacob what I saw. A few nights later, the house was quiet. Jacob had gone to bed early, and I was folding laundry on the couch. That's when I heard low murmurs, carried by the wind through the open window. Not just one voice, two. It had the rhythm of conversation, but I couldn't catch words. I stepped onto the porch. The whispering stopped instantly. I waited, with my heart in my throat, until I convinced myself it was just the wind in the stalks. When I turned to go back inside, there was a rustle, not the usual swish of wind, more like someone dragging their leg through the wheat. I stood there with the door half open until the night went still again. The next morning, walking along the edge of the field, I spotted a candy wrapper crushed in the dirt. I hadn't bought that brand. Someone had been there. The breaking point came a week later. Around 1:20 a.m., the motion light on the porch snapped on. My heart stopped. I grabbed my mag light and eased the door open. "Who's there?" I called. For a moment, nothing. Then, just beyond the light's edge, two dark shapes shifted. They lowered, slipping beneath stalk height, and glided sideways, like they were skimming through water. I bolted the door and called 911. Two deputies came within 20 minutes. They swept the field with flashlights. One carried a thermal imager. "There," I heard him mutter, pointing. The screen showed faint heat blooms, moving. But no bodies, no faces, just smudges of warmth that faded before they reached them. In the wheat, they found fresh boot prints. Size differences suggested 2 people. The tracks ran parallel to the tree line, then ended in a patch of mashed straw, like the men had just vanished. The deputies gave a half-hearted reassurance. "Could be trespassers, could be kids. We'll patrol the area." Then they left. That didn't settle me at all. I dragged a blanket into the living room and slept on the floor by the window for the next 3 nights. Jacob's bed I pushed against the inside wall, farthest from the field side window. What used to be background noise now felt like a threat waiting to be named. The wheat didn't look beautiful anymore. It looked like a wall that kept things hidden. I finally bought 2 fence cameras and installed them with my neighbor's help. A week later, one of them caught something that still bothers me. At 3:08 a.m., deep in the wheat, 2 faint headlamps bobbed low to the ground. Then, black. I keep asking myself, thieves, teenagers, or something worse? Why always 2? Why the whispers that stopped the moment I listened? And if they were just people, why no car, no bikes, no noise leaving? It's been weeks since Jacob said a word about the men. Maybe he knows better than I do when not to speak of something. But I still catch him watching the fields like he expects someone to step out at any second. And truth be told, so do I. I run cattle north of Amarillo. It's not a big spread. Enough acres to graze, enough fences to hate, enough wind to make a man talk to himself. Winter of 21 came in sharp and mean. The kind of cold where sound carries farther than it should. Boots on frost sound like glass breaking. Wire sings if you brush it wrong. Breath hangs longer than you'd like. My night routine doesn't change. Check the tanks, skim off ice, flip the salt block, make sure the latches hold. I scan the herd without counting. Every animal has a tell. Number 53 with the torn ear. Number 23 limps when it's damp. You memorize these things until they live in your bones. I've got a healer mix named Dutch. Good dog, smart. He'll cut the herd but also keeps his eye on me, like he's solving a math problem while working. I didn't know until this story started that he had one fence line he wouldn't cross. The cow at the center of this was number 14. Black, with a splash of white across her face, stubborn as they come. Not a leader, not a follower, her own mind. That winter, she started peeling away from the herd every evening and fixing herself on one patch of trees beyond the north fence. Didn't graze, didn't wander, just stood stock still, with her eyes locked forward. Cows stare plenty. A hat in the grass will do it. But this was different. She didn't blink at Dutch, didn't flick an ear at me. Her whole body was drawn to that tree line. Dutch noticed too. He circled, then stopped at the same invisible point each night, stiff and refusing to go further. No whistle or hand signal got him to cross it. He'd arc wide, like the space itself told him no. On the 4th night, I lined up with her, stood where she stood, followed her sight. There was a shape at the fence, human height, narrow shoulders, head dipped, still. At first I thought it was a post until it tipped slightly. I swept my flashlight. The beam washed over wire and weeds. Came back, and the shape pivoted just enough to show me it wasn't wood. Then it was gone. Next day I walked that fence slow. Found a bottom wire pinched like someone had pulled it up and set it back down. On the barb, a scrape of glove rubber I didn't own. A boot scuff ground into steel. Nothing else. I told myself I'd park up there the next night. Took my old 243, cleaned it, set up in the truck. Dutch in the passenger seat. Wind biting. The herd bedded down, their breath clouding like steam. I cut the dome light and sat still. At 2:04 a.m., the herd shifted all at once. Hooves, hocks, low sounds. Then came the faint click of wire under pressure. I snapped the flood on, aimed at number 14's usual spot. Nothing. But she was down the slope toward the fence, head still fixed. Dutch pressed against my leg, breathing sharp. Near dawn, I drove the line. Found number 14 collapsed by the fence, eyes wide open toward the trees. No bloat yet. The county sent a vet. He said stress. Misstep. Cold. Words I'd heard before. He couldn't explain why she'd pushed so hard into the wire she shredded herself. He wrote unknown and left. I welded rebar anchors, strung fresh wire, set cameras. Dutch slept inside now, paws braced at the door. The herd gave that patch of fence a wide berth, even after she was gone. A week later, fresh snow gave me the truth. Rabbit tracks, quail, coyotes, and 2 boot prints on the far side of the fence, stopping dead at the pinch. No prints leading away, just a belly-shaped dent in the snow like someone had lain there watching. I set a motion cam. 2 nights of nothing. The pasture looked normal, except for the glove smear on the back of the housing, like someone had steadied it. That was enough. I didn't call the county again. I just adapted my routines. Earlier checks, later checks. Floodlights longer, rifle by the back door, Dutch by my feet. Neighbors asked what happened to number 14. I said winter, fence, stress. The easy answers. I didn't tell them about the figure that bent like no post, or the wire pinched back in place. People want a neat ending. Someone caught. A thief, a drifter, a teenager with a knife. I don't have that. I have a cow that wouldn't stop staring, a dog that obeyed a line I never drew, and a shape at my fence that knew when to vanish. Ghosts want belief. This wants work. Keep your wire tight. Keep your lights off until you need them. And if an animal fixes on something you can't see, stand where they stand. Look where they look. You may not like what you find. I'm 59 now, a widow going on 5 years. I live out here in rural Nebraska, where the wind runs across corn stubble like a broom dragged across a floor. Outsiders call it quiet. It isn't. It's a constant hiss of weather, the creak of wood, and coyotes yipping from the creek bed. I've kept this land because I promised my husband I would, and because I don't scare easy. At least, I didn't used to. My neighbor Earl, he owns the parcel north of mine, waited until one of those mornings to bring it up. "You ever think about selling that back 40?" he asked, leaning on my post like it was his. "Could save you some work." "It's not for sale," I said. Simple as that. But Earl wasn't the type to hear no once and drop it. A few days later, he came back with a number scribbled on scrap paper. It wasn't just low, it was insulting. I told him again, not for sale. He grinned like I was playing hard to get. That's when things started happening. The first sign was roofing nails scattered across my driveway, shiny little heads waiting for a tire. I spent an hour sweeping them up with a magnet stick. I told myself they must have fallen off a passing truck, though I knew better. Then I found the tractor hitch unpinned, the center link loose. Not enough to spot from the seat, just enough to break something expensive. A day later, one of my diesel cans smelled off. Gauge read half when it should have been 3/4. Somebody was siphoning. I added a lock. It was sawed halfway through by morning. I tried to stay calm, told myself to get cameras, put up lights, but instead I canned tomatoes and kept my head down. Doing anything else meant admitting someone was standing in my yard at night. Then came the meat. A greasy chunk tossed over the dog fence. Belle, my older dog, got into it. 10 minutes later, she was retching, legs shivering. I dosed her with peroxide and called the vet. She pulled through, but the tech told me bluntly, people bait dogs to get them out of the way. That sat heavier than any nail or siphoned diesel. Days later, a county inspector showed up. Anonymous complaint, he said, about junk vehicles. I don't have junk vehicles. I showed him my truck, my tractor, my four-wheeler with a dead battery. He nodded, marked boxes, and left. The complaint, he hinted, came from up north, Earl's property. That night, I drew the curtains earlier than usual. The wind pressed hard against the house. I was washing a mug when I heard it, tapping on the front window. Not a knock. Fingernails. Light, measured. 1, 2, 3. The dogs went stiff. I parted the curtain a sliver and nearly dropped. Earl stood inches from the glass, breath fogging the pane, holding papers against it. Already signed, sweetheart, he said, voice calm as if we were talking over coffee. All it needs is filing. I saw the words warranty deed across the top, and beneath it, my name in someone else's hand. A forged signature. Careful but wrong. I stepped back fast, went to the mudroom, grabbed the shotgun and phone. I didn't need to point the barrel. Just racking it was enough to send the message. I called 911. By the time the patrol car rolled in, Earl was gone. The deputies found tire tracks looping my gate, boot prints beneath the window, and a smudged deed copy under my wiper. They just wrote things down. "We know Earl," one of them said. That wasn't reassuring. I slept in the guest room after that, the one that doesn't face the road. I parked my truck nose out. Called a lawyer the next morning, took him the deed. He studied it under a lamp and said, "Sloppy, but I've seen worse pass." That was scarier than Earl at my window. We filed a restraining order, flagged my parcels at the county. The lawyer wrote Earl a letter full of words like trespass and intent to defraud. Meanwhile, I went to town for cameras. Gate, drive, porch, barn. I mounted them myself. Bell stuck to my hip the whole time, still weak but alive. Earl didn't stop driving by. Twice the cameras caught headlights pausing at my gate around midnight. Once, someone stood there long enough to smoke a cigarette, the ember glowing bright on the grainy feed. Too blurry to prove it was him, but who else would it be? Thanksgiving came and went. I ate pie with my sister, then drove home through fog so thick it crawled across the windshield. The house felt smaller when I unlocked it, like the walls were listening. I never went back to sleeping in the master. Too many windows, too much road. I stayed in the guest room with the shotgun on the floor, my hand over the stock like it was a railing. Earl signed the restraining order with a big grin, like he thought it was funny. Then, months later, he put his place up for sale. By October, he was gone. No goodbye, no fight, just gone. It should have been the end. But even now, when the wind skates across the stubble from the north, my dogs bristle. I catch myself checking the gate camera twice, 3 times a night. The papers from the lawyer stay in the drawer by the phone. I could toss them, but I won't. Because what scared me most wasn't Earl's grin at the window, or the forged deed, or even the poisoned meat. It was realizing how thin the line is between what's yours and what someone thinks they can take. Fence lines and signatures aren't enough. Sometimes all that holds is your refusal to give in. And I'll never forget how polite that tapping sounded. Like he had every right to be there. If you're now side-eyeing every barn, pasture, and tree line, welcome to the club. Smash that like button, hit subscribe so you never miss the next scare, and share how you'd keep your land safe in the comments below. And if you think hiking trails are harmless, you haven't watched this channel enough. Click now to watch 4 disturbing hiking horror stories, because the woods don't need monsters, just the wrong person watching you. Thanks for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.